So this past week, there was a pretty big defeat for the lawfare of the Zionist lobby, the global Zionist lobby. You know, everyone knows by now the sort of ridiculous bullshit that they engage in. They toss a bunch of money at like desperately trying to like sue people or you know, get them criminally charged or privately prosecute them in some countries where that's a thing that can happen for some reason, for like the most banal of things, like, you know, having a watermelon sticker on your car, or saying fuck Israel, or saying Israel is doing genocide. And one of these groups that does this a lot, because the countries that are the worst for this are like the UK and countries that have legal systems that are still very similar to the UK legal system. So like Australia, the UK itself, maybe Canada though to a lesser extent, where these groups take advantage of that to just endlessly sue people and fuck their lives up and shit. And even if you beat them in the end, like, you know, you still had to spend a bunch of money on lawyers. You still had to like put your life on hold to defend yourself, go through all the stresses that entails. So it has, you know, an effect on you anyway, which is the point. You know, these organizations have tons of money. They're funded by like billionaires, backed by like Western governments and such. So they can afford to like take you to court just to try and inconvenience you because you said something anti-Israel. Whereas, you know, that's much more painful for you. And this past week, there was a pretty solid victory over these people and their disgusting pro-genocide lawfare in the UK. There is this disgusting organization called the Campaign Against Antisemitism, which tried to sue the American-British comedian Reginald D for saying mean words about Israel, which was actually, weirdly, you would never expect this sort of headline to appear in like a Zionist organization like the BBC, but they actually reported on this, saying, "Judge quashes anti-Semitism case against comedian Reginald D. A judge has quashed a private prosecution. What a ludicrous concept, by the way. Private prosecution. Incredible, right? Brought by the Campaign Against Antisemitism against comedian Reginald D. saying it was intended to get him cancelled. We can look at the ruling here, which is public, on the UK judiciary website if you want to check it out for yourself. So Reginald D. was accused of like causing racial offense over a communications network for his tweets, basically just standard anti-Israel tweets. And the weirdest shit about this private prosecution stuff is that the way that it's regulated is that the private prosecutor who is paid and gets, for some reason, allowed to like enforce criminal law against you by private parties. There's like an honor system. The private prosecutor is obliged by the law to be honest and, you know, not to leave out context and stuff like that that could hurt their case, as a normal prosecutor is supposed to. It's like an honor system. But the thing is, if they don't do that, like if they don't act in line with their obligations, you have no real recourse against that because you still have to defend yourself against that in court and prove they did that in the first place, which is going to cost you a ridiculous amount of money, time, and effort. And then after, you know, even if you do prove that, probably nothing negative is going to be done to them for just egregiously violating this supposed legal obligation that they have. So this is what these organizations do with private prosecutions like this in the terrible countries where they're allowed. So what actually happened here is Reginald D. crowdfunded like £50,000 or something for his legal defense, and his lawyers like responded, basically saying the complaint was put forth by this organization and people within it based on like just them plain leaving out a bunch of context. And the judge, in his ruling, pretty much completely rubbished them once he was given this context. The judge writes, for example, that the supposed targets of these tweets were described to him in the initial complaint by the private prosecutor as a British-Israeli couple, whereas the response from Reginald Hunter's lawyer elaborated, saying that one of them is a patron of the Campaign Against Antisemitism who provides legal advice to it, and the other one is a member of its executive committee. And he says the wording of their summary misled me into believing there was no association, and I am satisfied that this was intentional. Like, he says this throughout like 20 times, by the way. Like, I find it insane that a judge can say, these people intentionally lied and misled me, and he doesn't have the authority, or maybe he just doesn't want to, just get them arrested immediately. I feel like that's something that you should just go to jail for. Just lying to a judge 12 times in a criminal complaint. That has to be illegal. He says that the solicitor in question was fined for misconduct, which was not disclosed at any point, which should have been disclosed. The same solicitor in question has previously been noted in court for putting false evidence before the court. He notes that the initial police complaint to Police Scotland, because what they did is they filed a police complaint to Police Scotland first, and then when the police declined to prosecute it, declined to pursue charges, they filed this private prosecution. But they didn't say to the judge that this complaint was filed by the Campaign Against Antisemitism. They didn't disclose that to him in their complaint. And he says, I am satisfied the wording in this summary was calculated to mislead me. How is this not illegal? I don't fucking understand. This is the sort of thing that like a lawyer should be disbarred for at the very least, and everyone involved should go to fucking prison for. It's just egregious. I was not given an explanation regarding how the two people in question came to report their complaints to the Campaign Against Antisemitism. There is evidence they have a previous relationship. The summary that they gave of Miss Backram's tweeting, that's the woman in question, that's the woman who Reginald D. Hunter was tweeting at, it was wholly inadequate. It did not reveal the extent of her tweets directed against him in the period preceding the complaints. The summary misled me into believing that his comments were addressed to her involvement with the Jewish faith, as opposed to his response that were being made to attempts to have him cancelled. Hunter's defense also provided the court with evidence that the CIA was like sending a bunch of letters out to venues trying to get his shows cancelled, and the judge said he was not informed of this in the original application, and that he is satisfied that the failure to disclose this was intentional, being an attempt to disguise the true purpose of their application to the court. Another incredible thing about this, by the way, is that a part of the summons, aside from the denouncements for his tweets, was like a racial hatred offense, because Reginald Hunter was performing at a comedy show, and the original application said a British-Israeli couple present at the show objected to the joke. It was a joke like, about Israelis killing babies or something. And then it turned out that the British-Israeli couple, described as a neutral, anonymous British-Israeli couple, were both members of the Campaign Against Antisemitism, who specifically went to that show so that they could claim to be victimized by his comedy set and denounce him. This is what they do. This is how these fucking organizations operate. They literally go in person, they'll go to your place of work and they'll try to bait you into saying something anti-Israel so they can then report you to the cops or denounce you before the court. It's crazy, right? The Charity Commission launched a compliance investigation into the CIA in November 2024 in regards to it abusing its status as a charity nonprofit to do this sort of thing. The CIA failed to inform me of that investigation. I am satisfied that these are clear breaches of their disclosure obligations. And then the judge goes on to note previous parliamentary reports and stuff into the activities of the CIA, that's a Freudian slip on my part, they're basically the same thing. Noting that it is essentially like a pro-Israel lobby organization rather than some neutral campaign against anti-Semitism, which I find quite bad because should the judge not have looked into this stuff himself beforehand? Should the judge not have done, not the judge, even not the judge, his assistant, because, judges have people who do this shit for them, who help them, don't they? I'm 100% sure they do. Should he not have looked into the CIA and who they are in his, initial judgment, in his, initial decision to allow the private prosecution to go forward? Seems like he should have, because he's only doing it now. And he found a lot of evidence that they are not a genuine anti-Semitism organization, as basically all these organizations are. They're just pro-Israel lobby organizations that exist to, go after people who are anti-Israel. Judge says, I am satisfied that the failure to disclose the matters regarding the organization's character and everything else were intentional. He says, if I had been aware of these matters, I would have refused to issue a summons. They would have found the application to be vexatious. The CAA have demonstrated by the misleading and partial way in which it summarized its application and its willful repeated failure to meet its disclosure obligations that its true and sole motive in seeking to prosecute Reginald Hunter is to have him cancelled. By the way, he's using the term cancelled here quite literally because they actually went to every single fucking venue and tried to get them to refuse to host Reginald Hunter's shows. Literally, I tried to get him cancelled in the most direct sense, as in getting his shows cancelled. And he says, I have no doubt that the prosecution is abusive. The judge says, my view of the conduct of the CAA is consistent with them as an organization which is not playing it straight, but which is seeking to use the criminal justice system, in this case for improper reasons. Now, I want to quote the best part of this, okay? The best part. This is like really the only way that if by some fucking miracle you happen to get a judge that is not a ridiculously biased, committed Zionist who will let this shit fly. This is the only possible way that these judges can do something to stop this shit from happening. The judge rules, right before his final line here, which is like quash the summons, I direct that a copy of this judgment must be disclosed by the CAA and attached by it in all future judicial applications. Wow. That basically destroys the organization. They're going to have to disband now, because what are they for if not for just filing frivolous legal cases against people for being against Israel? I would assume they could appeal against this, and I would hope such an appeal would not be granted. And one issue with this is that this sort of organization, I feel like, in the face of like a ruling like that, that basically means that any judge who they ever try to manipulate in the future is going to immediately know what they are and what they do. And essentially, they're never going to be able to file anything like this ever again. What I would do, if I was in that position with their nefarious aims and such, is I would just make a new organization and do the same thing. That's technically not the same organization, Though it might be difficult to, like, apply for charity status again. I don't know. Like, there's certainly ways around that. And there's also other organizations like fucking UK Lawyers for Israel that do this sort of thing and stuff like that, that they could just, those organizations could do that, so this sort of thing in the future instead, and they wouldn't need to attach the disclosure that the judge for CAA to attach to their future filings. But still, that is fucking hard. That's brutal. Yeah, I've never seen anything quite like that, like against these Zionist lawfare organizations that basically says, what you're doing is a joke, and any other judge who sees you try to do this again in the future will also know that it's a joke. So yeah, that's one positive thing at least. It's like, this is precisely what should be happening in all of these circumstances. Not just that, but everyone involved should be going to fucking prison, okay? Like, how in the fucking world can a judge just rule that you, your lawyers, everyone involved in your filing intentionally misled him to try to prosecute someone abusively, and you don't just immediately get fucking arrested and put in preventative detention? What is going on here? Like, it's good that he ruled there has to be future disclosures about this, but I feel like this is actual, like, full-on criminal, like, should be a criminal offense that is worthy of jail time, because what a fucking joke. How else do you stop them from doing this shit? And as well, the judge didn't rule that they have to pay the cost of the defendant of their private prosecution. At no point in this, unless there's some law that I don't know of that means they have to. I don't think there is, which is insane as well. So still, he's not going to be able to refund the people who donated legal fees to him and such. He's not going to get any compensation for that unless he sues them, which I imagine he can't do. Or maybe he can, who knows. So he shouldn't have to go through that process. Years and years and years of another fucking legal case, which you probably never get a payment for because they're going to go bankrupt after this. Their entire organization's been destroyed. But yeah, it is at least funny, even though there's lots of questions to ask here about like how they could get around this, why the judge didn't go further, etc. I hope this at least destroys the Campaign Against Antisemitism, which is like one of the worst fake Zionist anti-Semitic incident counting / lawfare organizations in the UK. One of the worst, I said, because trust me, there's others. Trust me, they have like 10 more.